The story of World War II is a saga of unprecedented sacrifice, bravery, and strategy that reshaped the world's geopolitical landscape forever. At the heart of this global struggle was the confrontation between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, an epic clash that defined much of the war's trajectory and ultimate outcome. The role of the Soviet Union in defeating Germany was monumental, yet it is a story that often goes underappreciated in popular narratives, especially in the West. Today we will dive deep into the Soviet Union's critical contributions to the defeat of Nazi Germany, exploring the battles, strategies, and sacrifices that turned the tide of history. Let's set the stage by looking at the geopolitical landscape in 1941. At this point, Nazi Germany had already demonstrated its military might, conquering much of Europe with lightning speed through the Blitzkrieg strategy. France had fallen, Britain stood alone in the West, and the United States had not yet entered the war. Hitler, emboldened by these successes, turned his attention eastward to the Soviet Union in an operation codenamed Barbarossa. The invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, was the largest military operation in history in terms of manpower and casualties. Over 3 million Axis troops stormed across an 1,800-mile front, aiming to crush the Soviet Union in a matter of months. The initial stages of Operation Barbarossa were devastating for the Soviet Union. The German Wehrmacht, highly trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened, overwhelmed Soviet defenses, capturing vast territories and encircling entire armies. Cities like Minsk, Smolensk, and Kiev fell, and millions of Soviet soldiers were killed or captured. The Nazis believed that the Soviet Union would collapse under the weight of this assault, but they underestimated both the resilience of the Soviet people and the strategic genius of their leaders. One of the defining moments of the Soviet Union's resistance was the Battle of Moscow, which began in October 1941. Despite the Wehrmacht's initial advances, Soviet forces, under the command of General Georgy Zhukov, managed to halt the German offensive just miles from the Soviet capital. The harsh Russian winter played a significant role in this defense, as German troops, unprepared for the freezing conditions, suffered immensely. Soviet counteroffensives pushed the Germans back, marking the first major defeat for Hitler's army and shattering the myth of its invincibility. Another turning point came in the city of Stalingrad, a name that has become synonymous with resistance and sacrifice. The Battle of Stalingrad, which lasted from August 1942 to February 1943, was one of the bloodiest battles in human history, with an estimated 2 million casualties. Hitler was obsessed with capturing Stalingrad, both for its strategic importance and its symbolic value. The Soviets, under the leadership of General Vasily Zhukov, fought tooth and nail, turning the city's ruins into a fortress. The turning point came in November 1942 with Operation Uranus, a brilliant encirclement maneuver that trapped the German Sixth Army. After months of brutal fighting and starvation, the Germans surrendered, marking the first major German capitulation of the war. The victory at Stalingrad was a psychological blow to the Nazis and a morale booster for the Allies. While Stalingrad often takes center stage, it's important to remember that the Eastern Front was a continuous theater of war, with countless battles and campaigns that drained German resources and morale. The Battle of Kursk in the summer of 1943 was another significant moment. Known as the largest tank battle in history, Kursk saw the Soviets repel a massive German offensive. By this point, the Red Army had not only recovered from the initial shock of Operation Barbarossa, but had also rearmed and retrained, often using captured German equipment and intelligence to their advantage. Kursk marked the last major German offensive on the Eastern Front, after which the Wehrmacht was largely on the defensive. The Soviet strategy was not just about individual battles, but also about relentless pressure. The Red Army's ability to launch simultaneous offensives across multiple fronts forced the Germans to stretch their resources thin. Operations like Bagration in 1944 demonstrated the Soviets' growing strategic sophistication. Bagration was a massive summer offensive that annihilated Army Group Center, the backbone of German forces on the Eastern Front. The operation's success opened the door for the Soviet advance into Eastern Europe and eventually into Germany itself. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new daily videos. One cannot discuss the Soviet war effort without acknowledging the immense sacrifices made by its people. The human cost of the war for the Soviet Union was staggering. Estimates vary, but it is widely agreed that the Soviet Union suffered around 27 million deaths, both military and civilian. Entire cities and villages were obliterated, and the countryside was ravaged. Yet the Soviet people, men, women, and even children, mobilized in extraordinary ways. Factories were relocated east of the Ural Mountains, beyond the reach of German bombers, and production of tanks, planes, and weapons skyrocketed. Women played critical roles as snipers, pilots, and partisans, defying traditional gender roles to defend their homeland. The Soviet Union's role in the war was not limited to the battlefield. Diplomatic efforts were also crucial. The alliance between the Soviet Union, the United States, and the United Kingdom, known as the Grand Alliance, was an uneasy partnership marred by ideological differences and mutual suspicions. Nevertheless, cooperation among the Allies was essential. The Soviet Union benefited significantly from the Lend-Lease program, through which the United States supplied vital materials, including trucks, aircraft, and food. While the Soviets often downplayed this assistance, it played a critical role in sustaining their war effort. As the Red Army pushed westward, liberating occupied territories, they exposed the horrors of Nazi rule, including the concentration and extermination camps. The liberation of Auschwitz in January 1945 by Soviet forces remains one of the most poignant moments of the war. The discovery of the Holocaust's full extent added moral weight to the Soviet Union's struggle and underscored the necessity of defeating Nazi Germany. By the spring of 1945, the Red Army had reached the outskirts of Berlin. The Battle of Berlin, which began in April 1945, was the final major offensive of the European theater. Soviet forces encircled the city, engaging in intense urban combat. By May 2nd, Berlin had fallen, and Hitler was dead by his own hand. The Soviet flag raised over the Reichstag became an enduring symbol of Nazi Germany's defeat. The victory, however, came at an enormous cost. The Soviet Union emerged from the war devastated, with vast swaths of its territory in ruins and millions of its citizens dead or displaced. Yet its role in defeating Nazi Germany was undeniable. The Eastern Front was the primary theater of World War II, absorbing the bulk of German military resources and inflicting over 80% of German military casualties. Without the Soviet Union's contributions, the outcome of the war would likely have been very different. The legacy of the Soviet Union's role in World War II is complex. On one hand, it demonstrated extraordinary resilience, strategic acumen, and the ability to mobilize an entire society for total war. On the other hand, the Soviet regime's oppressive nature, including purges, forced labor, and political repression, cannot be overlooked. Nevertheless, the courage and sacrifice of the Soviet people deserve recognition and respect. As we reflect on this monumental chapter in history, it is crucial to remember the lessons it offers. The defeat of Nazi Germany was not the result of any single nation's efforts, but a collective struggle that required immense cooperation and sacrifice. The Soviet Union's role, often overshadowed in Western narratives, was central to this victory. Understanding this complexity helps us appreciate the global nature of World War II and the shared humanity that endured its horrors. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the role of the Soviet Union in defeating Nazi Germany, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more historical explorations. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. What are your thoughts on the Eastern Front and the Soviet Union's contributions? And as always, stay curious.